Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, around the world, around the country, around the state, or even around the city, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Theresa J. Canada. Today, I'm going to have a very brief video about a topic that people have asked me about, even about my book. So I said, why do you have the story of 7, brown and Black girls? Why don't you have any stories about the Black males or the specific Black Latino males? I said, because there were so few who were there. And at the time, I couldn't find everybody. So I really focused on just, quote, the sisters, because I knew them. I was still in touch with them over the years. And it was easy for me to connect with them and set this standard up for my writing. So that's what happened in terms of why. So I want to talk a little bit today about the Black males who may have been part of. Now, in the beginning, you've seen a couple of episodes in the beginning of when I started the podcast of my classmates who were in the same fourth grade classes, not all in the classes, but we were all in the fourth grade together at PS6. And there were basically 2 Black males who were part of the podcast. And those 2 Black males who were part of the podcast were actually in my school, in my classroom in 3rd grade before I went to PS6. So we were friends. I don't know. I think we might have been in 2nd grade together. I have to ask both Ronald and Larry. I think so. I'm pretty sure. I have a 3rd grade picture. So I know they're in my 3rd grade, but I don't remember the 2nd grade. Don't get me started. I have no idea. But I think that somebody has the 2nd grade class picture somewhere. And at some point, if we find times in our lives to look forward, we can come up with it. But the significant thing was, why were there not as many Black males going to PS6 as there were Black and brown females on PS6? That was a big question. Now, I know that parents had to choose whether they want their children to attend. So that's part of the problem. Some parents probably felt they didn't want their children and sons to go to a strange environment or whatever. I mean, it wasn't any easier for the girls. I'm just saying that could have been a comment that parents might have said, no, I'm not sending my child there. I'm not sending my child there. I'm not sending my child there. So that was part of it. So other than thinking about what parents might have thought about doing in terms of whether or not, they would send their sons, maybe they would think it would be more difficult for their sons to be able to cope as opposed to the girls being able to cope. I don't know. Maybe that would have been a thought. But let me just think about this. I talk about the type of Black males and their roles integrating schools in the North. And I will be having a Black male who actually integrated the schools in Massachusetts, Boston Public Schools. So it's a very interesting interview, and you please listen out for that. A very, very interesting interview about his experience in the Boston Public Schools. And people think it's like, oh, it's the same. No, it's not the same. It's very different. And also the fact that, it was a Black male principal who was also instrumental in helping to make that a success for that particular student. So that's another story. But in essence, why there's so few Black males who are integrating in the schools or part of the desegregation effort in the North? Because think about it. If all they were doing is having children move from their predominantly Black, and that takes the city, Puerto Rican neighborhoods to these other communities, they may not have wanted these young men in the neighborhood. Think about it. This was in the mid 1960s, all right, and early 70s. So they probably may not have wanted these young people in their neighborhood. And it may be parents who understood that dynamic and felt their child would be safer in the neighborhood they were living in. And to think about it, it makes sense to me. It makes a whole lot of sense. Now, it would have been different if there was a reverse. I tell about the reverse situation where you had students who were coming from from the Harlem district going to outside of Harlem, and there were people coming from the other districts going into Harlem. That didn't happen. That did not happen. They never did the reverse situation. They never did that. And part of it was because the schools were mostly overcrowded in the Black and Puerto Rican areas of the city of New York. It was overpopulated because that's the only place that you could probably live. And so that's where you attended your school. And if those of you who, have been watching my podcast, you'll see the story about, I'm talking about the PS 157, my school that I attended from kindergarten to third. And I'm talking about PS 6 and, show the actual, I got out and went out in the street and showed you a picture. So you can see what it looks like. One is still now a school and still premier school. The other one has now been converted to a residential housing situation. And I think at one point I'll talk about what happened until they finally reverted to this, but it's still a beautiful structure, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful structure. So saying that. But in terms of the Black males coming to PS6, they were few and far between. As a matter of fact, Ronald only lasted in the class. He stayed there for fourth grade, and then he ended up transferring out. If you listen to the previous podcast, he ended up going to attending a private school after leaving PS6 in the fourth grade. So I don't know what that experience was like, but I can imagine if it was bad, if you didn't think if the PS6 was a really challenging situation, I'm sure some of the private schools that he had, they were sent to were just as challenging, if not more. So that's why I wasn't able to write about the Black males. I didn't have a large enough cohort of Black males who were part of this process to be able to interview and ask them about their experiences and answer the response to certain questions. That's why I decided to do the podcast, because this gave an opportunity for those of my friends who I still had in connection with. And I found people. People know me. I'm a find people, so I found you. And thank goodness for other people network and so forth and so on. So I was able to pull us together. But that was a very poignant moment to have my classmates to basically, jumpstart the podcast. And I really appreciate them tremendously for being involved. And I think that would it be different if there were more Black males? Yes, it probably been different. But for a variety of reasons, I think part of it had to do with the fact that people may have been uncomfortable with even young 9, 10, 11-year-olds. They might have been uncomfortable. Not that they were that comfortable with me. Okay. So you can imagine the kind of the situation it was for the Black male children. Probably extremely difficult. And I mean, I'm sure that there were some situations that took place, but it all depends upon the kind of support you had from home and your community and your friends, maybe in your neighborhood. That might have made a difference. And I know, it's probably helpful to know that some people were able to do that. And they talked about, so listen to our previous episodes, you'll hear about the stories and everybody's experiences going through the process where they went to school and where they ended up going to PS6 and what they did beyond PS6, which is also important to know about the Black males. Because one of the guest speakers I'm having talks about his current situation, what he's doing and how he felt that experience, but he'll tell you about his experience. So listen up, because it's coming. So I'm pleased to have his perspective, actually, what happened to him as part of the busing situation in Boston, Massachusetts. So listen for that particular episode and you'll get information, because it's not that many that I can contact who experienced that or who are out there really who are part of it. I'm still seeking some people. So if you know somebody who was part of a desegregation or busing experience in the North or Midwest, and as a male, I mean, I have one, when I started my podcast, it was one of the professors Professor Turner, he was interviewed from Iowa, which was a busing situation. So there are people out there, and you need to know that they exist. And you need to know more about learn more about what they're talking about, to give you some incentive and to pursue what you need to pursue. Because if people went through all of that during that era and beyond, what do you think you can do now? You should not be starting from scratch. You should say, okay, let's go to the next step and the next step and the next step. All right. So there's a lot that you can do. But I'm going to share this information so people can know what took place, what can take place, and you can still excel. So I want to talk about Black males and their roles integrating schools in the North, which is few and far between. There were much less. And if you can go back to the history of those in the South, there were mostly females. The Little Rock Nine, you didn't have equal amount of young males and young females. It was more predominantly females. So that says a lot right there. Now, not that they're not capable. I'm not saying they're not capable. It's just that they did either, I can say for a variety of reasons. Either there wasn't that focus in terms of the academics as much, and maybe somehow, or maybe some parents felt they wasn't going to take that risk to have their sons to be exposed to those kind of hostile environments. And to be honest with you, I don't blame them. Okay, I don't blame them. So I want to share that with you in terms of why there aren't the book talks about the 7 Black and brown girls, okay? And that's because I knew of them, and asked them to participate in me talking about the stories of what happened with us leaving our elementary schools and going to PS6. Just a snippet of what probably took place in other parts of the country. And I'm going to see if I can continue to share these ideas and these thoughts with you moving forward. And just hang in there with me. Just stay with me, and you'll learn something. Listen. I know when I was in I was a fourth grade teacher outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I had all these little cliches and mottos that I would use, and one of them was "Listen, and you'll learn." So if you don't listen, you aren't going to learn. So I'm telling you, this is why I'm saying to the podcast, listen, and you're going to learn. All right. That's my hope, that you listen to this and you're going to learn something. But definitely reach out if you can. If you know some of the people who you know would be interested in talking about their experiences, please have them contact me. My information is available on my website. Or you can just put some comments in the description in the bottom in the comment section, and I'll read it when I get a chance, and I'll follow up with it as much as possible. So other than that, that's about all pretty much I want to talk about today. And with this little snippet, so people know why there's nothing about the Black males in my book. And that's the reason, because there weren't enough of a massive number. I mean, it wasn't even 3 or 4 people. It wasn't even 3 or 4 guys. Unfortunately, it wasn't even 3 or 4. That tells you the meager number of Black male students in elementary school, the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Okay. And so we can do better. We can do better. I'm saying we can do better. So thank you for listening. Hopefully you learned something from this episode and you can pass the word around. And so what they're not teaching you in the classroom, you can learn it here, because Dr. Cannon is not playing. This is serious stuff. We need to learn. We can, wherever we can learn, all means are possible for the learn, we need to learn. And it'll help us have a better society as a whole. That's it. So anyway, thank you for sharing your time with me, listen to this podcast, and we look forward to you having a presence at another episode coming up soon. Have a great day. Have a good night. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.